everyone, and welcome back to The Things We Know. Today, we are diving into why compassion and kindness matter now more than ever. I mean, it has always mattered, but I feel like we are in a front facing. I feel like we are in a deficit of compassion and kindness and empathy. I know, you know, that there's a lot of it in the world. We are surrounded by friends and family and community that have oodles of empathy and compassion. But to watch what is happening in our country right now, it makes it seem like it is absolutely ephemera and just disappeared. So I think this is a
Mm,
really important topic today. What say you?
absolutely. I think that no matter who you are and how you're behaving on any given day, I don't think anyone can disagree that small moments of kindness and real connection and showing up for each other makes a difference. And so often, usually, so often what we see, and actually, when tragedies happen, people really do show up and take care of each other in the moment. I think because we live in a time where there's 24/7 access to information where just everybody can go and create an algorithm that supports, you know, maybe the issues that you're upset about. Or algorithms can really pick up your emotions and your leanings. It's leading us to this very dehumanizing state of being. And that's where all the empathy and compassion gets sucked out of the room. As soon as we don't see each other as human, we completely lose our ability to empathize and be kind. And so we're not necessarily just going to be talking about online behavior because I don't even know how to begin. I'm so like such a novice in that world. I don't even know how to begin to put to words like how ridiculously awful people can be, how hateful
Yeah.
people can be online. It is unbelievable how mean. We've talked about it like in the most innocuous places, like somebody posting their outfit or a recipe where people can be so nasty. So, like I don't even know, but in general, like why, like you and I aren't even here to answer why it's left the room or like where it's gone or how that happened, but we are here to talk about why it matters and how we can bring more compassion into our lives. And because as you can tell, even from our voices and emotion, we can get into that exact same place where we can be really, really hateful in response to what we think is happening. So it's like, how do we not let that change us? How do
Mm.
we like dip into compassion and figure out like figure out how to get beyond just the pain of the empathy
Mm.
and put compassion into action?
So let's define this. Because I think, we can often think of them as being interchangeable. So there's a reel that I will be putting up on our socials on Instagram. Um, the Things We Know pod. From Dan Harris. He was on Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace, and he defined empathy is a hardwired trait most of us have to feel other people's feelings. And compassion is empathy plus the desire to help even when you can't. And I think that's, in the sort of coaching world, we talk about being empaths. So I love this acknowledgement that everybody is hardwired for empathy in theory. But compassion is an action that you're taking the next step. Not only do you feel bad for that person, and you're feeling what they're feeling, but you want to do something to help. And so going back to what you said, like in moments of tragedy, again, like the fires, people who had lost their homes were still helping their neighbors gather their stuff up or watering down their house so that maybe their house wouldn't catch on fire. Like people not only were losing things, but they were stepping up to be compassionate with their neighbors as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Um, I think, and also just Brene Brown, I think said something kind of similar to Dan Harris, which is empathy is feeling with someone, right?
Mm.
How many of you, if you're watching anything in the news, you're watching those fires, you're watching what's happening with deportation, gosh, I mean, at the day that we're recording this, a horrific plane crash happened, like when you're feeling with somebody, right? And it doesn't even have to be something that's far away that you feel bad about and powerless to. And I'll give you an example in a second about how it can just happen right in front of you. But feeling with someone, compassion is what moves us to action.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's interesting because I think understandably you can interchange it. Like I feel such compassion, but I can't do anything, right? Like people
Right.
will say all I can do is pray, right, from where I am or something, and like that's what they think they can do, and that is something they can do. But
Yep.
and Tanya Singer was someone whose research was mentioned in a couple of posts and articles we were looking at. She says if we stay stuck in empathy, it can overwhelm us. Compassion is what helps move us forward. So how do we balance caring deeply without feeling drained, right? And I
Yeah.
think we've talked about it already this year because, well, this year just like served us up fast. It was like we jumped on a treadmill that was at the highest speed. That's what it feels like. Like there
Yep.
was no warm up. There was
Nope.
no gradual incline. It was just like, oh, fuck. And so here we are. How do how do you balance caring deeply without getting drained? Well, we talked a little bit about this. We'll continue to talk about it this year because I think it's looking like we're going to have to continue to check in on this. There's a lot of ways that just boundaries around what you give your attention to and how you spend your time matter, and
Yep.
also overwhelm. Like one of the best definitions that was ever given to me about overwhelm was it's like looking at the top of the ladder and trying to jump up there versus taking
Mm.
the steps. Overwhelm is like there's so much going on right now. What do I do about it? How can I help? I feel powerless. I feel unhelpful. I'm way over here. I feel stuck. I don't know what to do. And I'm just so sad. And I want to curl up in a ball. And I have a great example of that in my house, which is unfortunately last week, my son, who I've talked about here many times, Griffin, luckily hasn't had, knock on wood, a ton of seizures, but he did have a day where he had 7, which really sucks. Once in a while, the way his seizures show up is he can have a cluster in a day. And there's different things we can try and rescue meds, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And he, we were next to him for all of it, and like going to get something, or like a rescue med that wasn't right there where he was asleep and safe in his bed. He had one that got so big, he hit his head on the side of the bed and cut it, and there was bleeding. It was a lot, and my other son had to come help me move him. He's okay. We've been through this before, and it sounds really scary. He is okay, but it still was like a horrible thing to go through. And thank God, he's okay right now. When Miles was kind of processing this, once Griffin was okay and he was safe and we had ice on him, I found, I looked over and he was so distraught. And I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "I'm just overwhelmed. I don't know what to do right now." And he was
Mm.
already stressed. He was in the middle of finals. He had a big, huge state competition coming up for his Constitution team. He was like really just wondering how to find his breath. And unfortunately, in his young years, he's been through a lot. He's 18. He's
Yes.
been through a lot of horrific stuff that's happened with Griffin and the horrible tragedy that happened in front of him, where a fellow 14-year-old was killed by a tree that fell. He's been through some awful stuff. And he's luckily learned some tools and had some support around that, but has identified that one of the hardest things for him in any tragedy is I don't know how to help.
Yeah.
And like there's this huge desire to. And I think that is that feeling, that's being stuck in empathy. Like, oh, I feel so much pain here. What can I do? And it's not that he lacks compassion. It's just he needed help getting there. And it really struck me, and I got very emotional. I know I did when I told you about this too, Lisa, I said, God, I know that feeling. I said, why don't you, I know you haven't been to the gym and I think that's going to help you. Why don't you head over to the gym? It's really close. It's walking distance. And he said, I feel terrible doing that. I feel bad that I can go and he can't. And I said, oh God, how many times has that like been at the root of what's keeping me stuck? This empathetic solidarity where you feel like you should suffer because someone else is suffering. And I said, I get that. And I'm not going to force you to go. It's a suggestion. But what if the best thing you can do for him is be the most grounded version that you can achieve possibly right now when he is awake, so that
Mm,
you can not just enjoy him being more alert, which took a couple days for him, but also that you're going to be in a less high nerve state. And we talked about that for a while. And then he went and he did feel better. And he, was right there when Griffin was finally talking again. And so it's a great example that I didn't think about until we were preparing for this, was like, oh, what do we do? I have so many times in the past 2 weeks, as Lisa knows, like been like, I just want to curl up in a ball. This is all so much. This is so much. There's so much pain. There's so much suffering. What do I focus on? And I'm sure most people go through that. And then there's this reminder that the overwhelm is part of the goal sometimes of these kind
mm,
of news cycles. And
yep.
so how do I look inward, find my source of strength, and decide what I can show up for fully, and where I can trust that other people that are really good at that are showing up fully. And so, there's that too. It was like, oh, yeah, locally, I know about this. I can donate to this. I can stay informed of this. These are the things that I'm going to focus on. So
I
that's what
think
my compassion moved me towards.
Yeah, and in another article that you sent or that we were referencing, empathy and compassion in uncertain times, and this was actually put out in 2022 by Florence. I hope I'm saying this right, Scallium. It came out in 2022, and it was really in reaction to the Ukraine war. And she talks about this is like, and again, still going on. and
Mhm.
and and then we've got what's going on in Gaza, and then we've got what's going on in the United States, and she calls it a great unraveling. We've got weight of war, climate crisis, economic stress, injustice. And she quotes, I think she says it's actually a close friend, a gentleman, I assume, by the name of Alex Nunn. And he says, we are not educated to deal with or respond to the wider suffering in the world, and we can get frozen in empathy. And that's what that sounds like, right? That not only frozen in empathy, but even frozen in compassion, because compassion is the act of wanting to help. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by everything that's happening, and for Miles, yes, in the moment, it was Griff. But Miles, again, he was working on a Constitution uh, presentation, going to state, right?
Right.
Like we are all, if you are paying attention at all, um, there's a lot coming at us fast and furious. And
Yeah.
you're right, it is meant to overwhelm. And so you can even feel frozen in compassion, again, so much for me around the fires, seeing so many people from all over the country, all over the world. I mean, obviously I'm in LA, my friends are in Chicago, my family's in Ohio, friends are in Ohio too. And they're reaching out like, what can I do? And I was just sending them links like, here, do this, because they felt so helpless and so sad to watch this devastation happen here in LA, So I guess my point is it is okay to feel frozen in empathy and compassion. And like you and I've said a million times, and we'll continue to say, what's your next best step? And if praying is all you can do right now, that is 100% okay. Because the key is trying to get you out of the overwhelm so that you can move forward and help.
Yeah. Wasn't it Dan Harris's recommendation about like, may you be free from suffering, was a
Correct.
prayer you can say to yourself to get yourself out of overwhelm. I agree. I mean, the amount of times people have said that, like, I can pray, and
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It's
Now,
interesting while
words
you're
and
saying
prayers,
that, I
thoughts and
was,
prayers, not helpful after a school shooting. I just want a
no,
side note. Thoughts and prayers, big bunch of bullshit. Go ahead.
yeah, yes. Saying, typing that in, and only that, and doing nothing about gun control. But yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so there's that too. There was like a shooting in the past 2 weeks too. Like you
Well,
and I
there's a
are
shooting
so
every day.
well, I know. And I mean, like, that's the thing. It's like there's a whole list there. It's already, from the point that I started writing this and you and I came to record, it's already outdated. There's like
Yeah.
another, we'll get off and find out about something else. It is feeling overwhelming. When I was listening to that, the compassion and all of that, what I was thinking about was it's a very childish inner voice. And I say childish because I remember thinking these kinds of things as a child, and I haven't outgrown this part of me, which is, what about them? But what about them? Like when a new tragedy happens, I want to be like, yeah, but people still lost their homes. So please
Right.
don't move on to this without remembering that. I remember feeling that way. I can't even remember now, like not long after those Maui fires, something else horrific happened
Yes.
somewhere. And I just remember being like, no one's thinking about them anymore. Like there's this, but what about them? What about them? Like we don't have a finite amount of sympathy and compassion. I mean, people have a finite amount of time, but you know, what is it that we can cultivate in ourselves so that communities are being compassionate and showing up for each other? Because things all over the world are happening, and yeah, you can pray and you can donate, but maybe it is like a call to like reconnect locally, since we've all been so globally plugged in.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And here's the spoiler alert. This is going to continue. I mean, you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
when the Maui in we're in a stage, and I'll say it, regardless of whether Trump's in office or someone who's qualified is in office, we are at a place in our world because we're so globally connected that everything does seem to be coming at us fast and furious. So it is very easy. I mean, I had a friend actually reach out to me. She lives in Chicago, and she said, "How are the fires? Because ever since the inauguration, like that's just disappeared from the news." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it hasn't disappeared in my news because I live in LA, but yeah, I mean, and for the next 4 years, and maybe for the rest of our life, like shit's coming down fast and furious, no question." And
Oh
so
yeah.
it really is about, I love that, again, going back to this article, empathy and compassion in uncertain times, which I just want to say again, came out in 2022. So, anyways, this idea that compassion actually helps us build resilience. So I don't think there's anything wrong with not taking, I know there's nothing wrong with not taking big steps. And so if all you can do right now is donate, if all you can do right now is pray, if all you can do right now is say, yes, may you be free from suffering. He said that's a Buddhist mindset. That's okay, because that will help you build the resilience that will help you perhaps the next time or eventually take forward movement on any one of these things. And as we keep going back to, pick a thing, because
Yeah.
we can't. I saw this too the other day, and maybe I've already said this on a pod. You and I have so many conversations. I can't remember what we record and what we don't record, but um, we can, the Western culture in particular has such a belief in self, in pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps, that we have to do everything on our own, that we shouldn't ask for help. And this is a time where pick what is important to you to focus on, and then go find that community to work with, because there are people that are actually trained. The one I was watching was talking about climate change in particular. He's like, so go find a climate change group. There will be people who are experts in climate change that can help you, someone who's not an expert in it, pick what works for you. We've got to stop thinking we have to carry the weight of the world all the time. Pick a thing and focus on that, and then you will feel like you're making that forward movement with compassion.
That reminds me, sorry, a little cough. That reminds me, I was telling you about a friend of mine in her 60s in Nashville who joined, and I think there's national chapters of it, a group called Third Act, people whose kids are grown and out of the house, and they're doing what they can to combat, climate change, and do some, they're climate warriors, and they're out
Mm,
in droves right now. So I love that feels like, what can I do with my time now that I have
yeah,
some, what can I do?
yeah,
And so there are people who have already thought about that, done the research, got the funding, and they just need the bodies. So you're
right.
right. That's something I I think people just want to be told, how do I do it? How do I
Yeah.
help?
When you're in overwhelm, you want to be told what to do. I mean, as coaches, we're always talking about
Yeah.
helping people find their own best answers. But in a moment of overwhelm, it is 100% okay to just show up and say, use me. Tell me where to go. What can I do?
Yeah. So I also like want to shift into just like this has been a while now, but the mood everywhere since COVID has just been
Mm.
cranky. And like road rage, I'm sure is really high. I haven't seen any stats about that, so I'm not going to pretend I know that that's true. I hate when people say things are high and they have no idea. Ugh, misinformation. But I definitely do. I think it's fair to say, if you read any of the articles that come out about what airlines are dealing with, what hospitals are dealing with, what the
Yeah.
customer service industry is dealing with, what insurance companies are dealing with. Kind of they've done that, but they have a lot of unhappy customers. But the treatment, I when I go to a grocery store, I am amazed sometimes in line how people are treating the cashier or other people in line,
Yeah.
and I know even the people who are trying every last bit of my compassion out in the news and the opinion sphere. I know, like I know enough to know like this shit's coming from somewhere. It's coming from
Yeah.
anger, insecurity, shame, something, right? And so I could, just stop at disgust and roll my eyes, but my like little secret weapon. That's funny. Do you remember I said I used to like teach my kids this like compassion for assholes, way of being? Like when someone's being an asshole, just kind of be like, I wonder what they're going through. They must be going through something.
Yeah.
Move
Yeah. Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's funny. That's coming back to me right now. But I just noticed this. Like yesterday, I had to run into FedEx for to drop off something, and this guy was coming out so angry, and I just held the door and smiled at him, and you could tell he wanted to be pissed off that I was doing it, and his shoulders dropped, and he goes, "Thanks." And I was like,
Mm.
not that I'm always great at this. Trust me, I'm not. But especially not around here, but at home. But I definitely feel like the ripple effect of kindness could, at least for you in your immediate sphere, help you. Like, you know what I mean? So like try it, not just because other people deserve it no matter what, because we don't know their story. Try it because you deserve it. You deserve the feeling.
A
It
million
for me
percent.
to like react or even just feel by someone, like I've let them like leak something out of me. But if I'm like, you know, no act of compassion is too small. So I just feel like if I smile and bring a lot of genuine compassion, not a fake smile, sometimes I can help, lessen whatever's going on with that person. Or they might just be like, freak, and I don't care. That's on them.
Totally.
But, you know, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, this is one of those moments where you're the light and I'm a little bit more the dark. But, I just feel like, speaking of COVID, when we went
Mm.
through COVID and nobody wanted to, there was this push against masks, there was this push against vaccines, there was this push against facts. I thought at the time, I mean, I was so dumbfounded by these people, and you might remember this, but where we lived, we were right across the street from the Department of Health. And so we had a very vocal group of anti-vaxxers that would protest every week or so. And I just remember being so dumbfounded by them. And at one point, Darren went down, and Darren had COVID for a month in April of 2020, and it was really, really, really bad. And he went up to them with compassion, like, hey, let me tell you what it was like for me when I had COVID. They could not have cared less, literally could not have cared less. And I guess I just thought, again, if we go back to this Alex Dunn quote, we're not educated to deal with or respond to wider suffering of the world. I hoped at the time, or thought at the time, that it was a anomaly. But now we watch, with DEI, with deportations, with women's reproductive health, this good amount, I don't know what the percentage is, but a genuine amount of people who just really only care about themselves. And here's where my dark nihilistic piece comes in. Fuck them. I just not, I'm not willing. I'm just not going to put I guess the thing is, I'm not going to put myself in the space where they are because I am not going to have compassion for them. That could change,
Mm.
but it's just at this point in time, it's my safety mechanism for myself. We have a limited bandwidth. And so I am going to show compassion for people who show compassion for others. I love that because correct. You don't know when you
Well,
see.
I can't know what they think.
Well,
I can't know
exactly.
how
That's
they
my
vote.
point.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not
Yeah.
your example is beautiful.
Yeah.
I would totally do the same thing. I'm just talking about when I see it, I'm not extending compassion to those people. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's my truth. I'm
Well,
sticking with it.
I mean, you're not going to run them over either, but yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm just going to avoid them like a
Yeah.
wide circle.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I wouldn't run straight into some, MAGA event either. I wouldn't like
No, because that
go
goes
find a
against
seat.
our
But
empathy and compassion, right? Like, though they
right.
are still human beings, but I'm just not
Right.
engaging. And they don't deserve my compassion. They just don't.
I
In my mind,
have a lot of
I think.
sadness. It's not so much compassion, but I have a lot of sadness for what leads people there. I do.
Agreed.
And that is a form of compassion
Okay.
because I kind of feel like where where did this is not like me or this isn't a simple question as it sounds, but like where did we go wrong when people treat each other this way? Where did we, and I think what it comes down to is I don't think technology is the bad guy. I think technology has also created community for bad guys, but
Correct.
um,
Yes.
I think it also can create unity too, where people feel isolated. However, I do think that we have increasingly in the past, I'm just going to say 30 years, but I'm sure it's more, could be less, but we've lived in a dehumanizing time. We live in
Yes.
a time where so it is just so much easier to be hateful about people when you don't think of them as human like yourself.
Right.
And there's so many studies about that. And we've
Yeah.
seen things like that where people who are staunchly against the idea of someone being trans ends up having a really good conversation with someone and realizes that it's a person, right? And vice versa, assumes that somebody, because they're from somewhere, would be some like, bigoted skinhead, but they were like the kind of Christian that actually, was following Christ's example. And so there's this, there's this, there's this hope that I've had for so long that's kind of flickering on and off right now, that when is it that we ever get to a place to see each other as human again and not go so far in one direction just because you hate what the other group stands for? Not like I want people to vote by their values, not by how much they hate the values of the other group. And like this is such a Pollyanna wish. We're so beyond that. So then how do I, go about the world knowing there's a ton of people like that are like hurt people, and people who are just lacking something are causing a lot of pain and suffering and death and destruction. And I can't prevent any of that, but I can be kind. Not nice. I don't give a shit about being nice, but I can be kind. And
Thank you for that delineation. Yeah, and I'm not saying,
yeah,
I mean, that's my issue.
that's my resistance is I be kind.
And I love it. I'm also with you on that. I guess I want to clarify, like, it's not that I don't think these 30 to 40% or however many percent it is, are not human. Like, they are human. And that's what's so sad to me, is that how can you be human and be so
Exactly.
self-consumed? Like, it's me, and not be able to feel for the other. And so, yeah, I mean, and so again, my point is, I am not going out of my way to be around those people so that I don't have to actively not have compassion, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah.
going back though, let's go back to where you were going.
I don't even remember where we were
Well, we
going.
were talking about the
I
small
mean,
acts of kindness, and there is a great mosaic analogy
right.
from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that every small act of kindness, it's like a little piece of a mosaic. You might not
Right.
see how your piece of kindness fits into the broader picture, but added up, it does make a gorgeous piece.
I do think that matters. I think
Yes.
we've been off camera saying, I mean, if Karma's a bitch, she's a slow bitch.
Jesus Christ.
But I do
Yeah.
believe in karma and kind acts. I do think sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't get repaid for generations.
Yep.
But I do think it matters. I think, regardless of what you believe, what God you worship, like to me, walking a spiritual path means whatever it is you believe, you're treating others with kindness along the way, that you have integrity. And I do think that matters. And I think the more and more people that care about that and find each other, the more we can hope to make a difference. But I'm sounding so Pollyanna and
No, 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 you're not. You're
flower
not.
childish right
Well,
now.
it's so funny because I was picturing the Coke commercial from back in the
So
70s.
was I. I was like, oh come on, Kari. This is like
No,
I,
no,
I mean,
no. It's
this is such
important.
a Pollyanna, like mom of young people kind of thing to say. It's ridiculously naive.
No.
I do think it matters how we treat people, and I will die on that hill.
Yes, it's not Pollyanna. And how sad that that's how we have to that's how we feel because it's so the again front facing this world right now feels like it is so lacks compassion and empathy. And so even talking about things that are literally just human nature feels like we're being Pollyanna unicorns and rainbows. We're not.
That's so sad. That's so dumb.
It's
I know.
sad.
And I think that I've always loved those quotes. It was like, I don't care what you accomplished, how many degrees you have, like how
Yeah.
many medals you have. It like how you treat people is what tells me, whether you're a
Yes.
success as a human or not, right?
No question.
And I think that that's yeah. And so I do like her mosaic idea that like if you think of something in a mosaic that everything, I mean, this goes back to just what kind of like the work we do. The more negatively you speak to yourself, the more like physically prone you are to getting sick,
Yep.
to disease, like to like actually having bad posture, all of that. And like there's been scientific studies of only positive words around the exact same plant in the exact same light, where the other ones having like all this negative things. It seemed like a silly experiment when actually it really did make such a difference in the color and the growth and the sprouting. And so it's the same. I mean, our community body is the same as a human body that way. Like we're a living, breathing thing. And the more negative it is, the more unhealthy it is.
I think, yeah, if I'm gonna, if you're listening to this and you do fall in that category of what's in it for me, which all humans do, um, practicing compassion is good for your health. Dan Harris
Mm-hmm.
says it in that reel that I'll be putting up, but then also this other article, Why Compassion and Empathy Are More Important Than Ever. Marshall Linehan's research on DBT, which I can't remember exactly what that stands for. You might remember off the top of your head. Compassion isn't just good for mental health. It reduces stress and inflammation. It improves immune function and even increases longevity. So if you are feeling that sense of like you're feeling you're not physically feeling good through all of this, take a look at how are you reacting to others? Are you showing compassion? It makes us
Uh,
healthier.
DBT stands for
Yes.
behavioral. I'm sorry, dialectal behavior therapy.
Thank you.
It's a type of talk therapy in psychotherapy that's based on CBT, which is cognitive
Yep.
behavioral therapy, and it's specially adapted, I think, for people
Mm.
who experience emotions very intensely.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
that's with the description, and I'm a big fan of CBT for a lot of things. I think,
Yeah.
I think talk therapy, and I think um, cognitive behavioral therapy and probably DBT. I don't know as much about it, but it sounds a little bit like neurolinguistic
Yeah.
patterns. But
Programming. Yeah.
I think the way people hear things, because words matter, and our association with words from our childhood and our beliefs, like that all gets kind of sparked and like you can rewire it, I think it's really helpful. And then there's also, we talk a lot about somatic, where you're getting more into your body and like, you know, the wisdom of like what you're feeling and what you're holding in your body. And I think both are really helpful for anyone who's experiencing intense emotions, which I don't know anyone who isn't right now, honestly.
For real. Yeah. So how do we bring this into our everyday life? Again, Dan Harris in that reel talks about, when you're in this place of overwhelm, it can be hard to figure out um, how to connect to being action oriented, right? And I love, he says action absorbs anxiety. I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's it in a nutshell. So, if you can start with the phrase, may you be free from suffering, and it helps you release a little of that overwhelm and lean into the power that you do have. So what are some of the ways you think we can really do this in our everyday life right now?
I think as best as you can, you know, evaluate the faucets you have on coming
Mm,
towards you, right? So like I found someone who who writes a blog that I read, and who said that he like turned off all sources of news except for NewsHour by PBS, and it's like 3 o'clock every day on YouTube. And I checked it out, and it is like, you know, I'm sure there's someone conservative listening going, oh, it's probably liberal bias, but it
yeah.
really, like, it is really a great place to just get some news. And there's
Hmm.
not a lot of like, you know, oh, and this with that, you know. Yes, you
Very
can follow
zen.
the people in, you know, in Congress who you follow and support. And of course, like if you're passionate about that, support them, support the people you know that know stuff, but really pay attention to if you're getting it from somebody who is just sharing the oh my god catastrophe versus people that are like, here's what you can do, right?
Yeah.
So really, like, before you even turn that faucet on, just be sure which faucet you're turning on. And just for your own mental health,
Yeah.
because it is really easy to get into overwhelm if you just turn all the faucets on.
It's literally like a
And
fire
then,
hose.
right.
Yeah.
And then, like, what I challenge people to do, and I work on it, I'm not always the best follower of it. And it's just one of those things that's rooted in patriarchy that I'm critical of. So I want to be self critical of it too, is listen before talking, you know, before
Mm,
you forward something, before you like, I mean, I'm not going to police what you do with your girlfriends, because Lisa and I send each other all kinds of rage stuff, but we're really good about going back, going, actually, here, this is what's really true. Um, you know, we're not putting it out to the world usually
right.
without checking on it. And I mean, yeah. So listening, like deep listening, not rushing to fix, not rushing to judgment, just like listen to it. And then I would honestly say, notice how you're feeling about it, because that's also a really good signal for you. Like some
Yeah.
things might just be really bringing up something that's painful for you, that needs your attention, or that like that's gonna be a little too complicated to act on, or like this is really important right now, right? Like
Mm,
this is an issue that means something to me, and then figure out like what are your next steps. So I would say that I like listen and process, and be in that space. I'm not saying do nothing. I'm just saying take a beat and listen to
yeah.
it first. Like kind of filter what's coming in, and like, okay, there's a lot going on right now. I can feel this in my body. I feel that pain. Lisa's suggestion that from Dan Harris, like, oh, you know, I'm really feeling like, may people suffering be lifted. May people who are suffering right now, you know, have an end to their suffering. Like, may there
Yeah.
be a good solution for this. That's a good way that will finally get you into how can I find out more about that. That's really sticking with me.
Well, and even like the idea of listening to your own body, because I woke up this morning and I went to brush my teeth. I was like, ow. And I realized I must have been grinding my teeth all night and I didn't even realize it. So listening to your
Yeah.
body around this stuff for sure. If there's people in your life that are actively going through something around all of this that's happening, I said it before, but with the fires, I really appreciated, like, I wasn't actively being evacuated, so people checking in with me, and I was doing a lot of posting about it on Facebook. So I really appreciated the people that were like, thank you for your text or your posts. That's really helping me understand what's happening. Just a simple, I'm thinking about you text. If you have the ability to go so far as to say, I'd like to do this for you, if that's okay, great. but just the simple, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you text. And this is in everyday life. This is if they're actively going through something, if they're actively going through grief. Um, that just that simple letting somebody know that you're on their heart can make such a difference to that other person. And I will tell you that's true whether you ever hear from them again. I know it from my own experience. I know it from people who have reflected that back to me when I've done it for them. That little moment of kindness, where maybe they don't have to answer any questions, they don't have to talk, they just know you're thinking about them. Huge, huge.
Yeah, I've never forgotten those people who have done that in times that we've been going through as a family that people knew about, and I didn't always get back to them.
Yeah,
And to share a beautiful example that you shared with me is you have somebody that you work with who did lose her home,
yeah.
and you reached out and said, "You do not need to reply. I just need you to know I'm thinking about you and I'm sending so much love." And she later, once she came up for air, was like, "That was so great. That was so clutch." And I think that's just really important to the amount of people in my life who I hear say, "Oh, I just didn't want to bother her. I'm just letting her have it." Like, no, actually,
But I want
you're
to say
not
really
bothering
quickly,
people.
yes, yes. But I really think this, I know this will be the third time I've quoted it, but this really hit me when we talk about people who aren't actively watching the news the way you and I do, and we don't even actively watch it that much anymore. I just thought this piece about not really being educated, and I think that means not necessarily in school, but in emotionally educated on how to respond to the suffering in the world. Like it never upsets me when I realize, I shouldn't say never. It rarely upsets me when someone can't go that extra bit because all I think, especially around grief, I just think they just don't know how. And that's
I totally
okay.
agree.
Right. I know you do. I know
I
you do.
totally agree. I think like reaching out with no strings attached like you did is just a great example of
Excuse me. I call.
that's
Yes.
something that won't just make them feel good. It will literally tell your system you're doing something and it'll help
Correct.
you.
Yes. 1,000,000%. Yes.
Like I couldn't leave last week for 3 days when Griffin had stuff going on. But you know what it did give me the chance to do was like check in my brain and my heart with a couple of people I knew I needed to check in with down in LA, around the fires. And so
Hmm.
it gave me the opportunity to be like, oh, just been thinking of you. You're on my heart. And,
Yeah.
I don't need to hear back from them to know
No.
that didn't hurt. That didn't hurt anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I will say, add the extra piece where you say you don't have to get back to me because
Exactly.
they want to, they think, oh shit, I got to get back to you. So I always add, you do not need to get back to me. And if they do,
Yeah.
great. And if they don't, then they feel like that's lifted from them.
Yeah.
Anything else around practical ways?
I would say remember that everybody, and I know this is a difficult one. If like, I don't know if everyone's doing the best they can. I will quote Brene Brown's husband on this that she shares in one of her books and a lot of her talks that I've heard her give that are on video. He said to her, "I don't know if everyone's doing the best they can, but I'm happier assuming they are."
Yes,
So
I agree with you
if you could
100%.
adopt that, like if everyone is doing their best, because you really don't know,
Right.
um,
And their best might not be your
it'll bring,
best. That's
it'll
okay.
literally, it can change you. It can move you
Yes.
into compassion, and it goes into, and we're gonna have a whole episode on forgiveness. It goes into like forgiveness isn't just for the other person; it's for you. It's really like removing the poison from your body to shift into
Yes.
compassion instead of rage and judgment. Like I feel a lot of rage and judgment right now, but when I shift into doing the best they can, I don't know if they aren't, but I'm just going to assume they are,
Yeah.
then I can move through and give a genuine smile to the guy who was being an asshole to the person at the cashier
Yeah.
at the cash register at I don't know, is it called the cash register anymore? At the whatever,
I
the person
FedEx.
at the counter in FedEx. But you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't need to know to assume they're doing the best they can.
Yes. And then again, this sort of, if you're feeling that overwhelm, maybe it is unplugging from everything for a couple of days. There's nothing wrong with that. Whatever you need to do to show yourself compassion around what you're feeling, you cannot pour from an empty cup. You will be no help to anyone if you are spiraling out of control around everything that's happening. And talk about something I'm not great at. I've been I've been spiraling for ever since, oh, I don't know, 11/5 of 2024 or 6 or whatever day was after the election. So I'm not great at it, but it is something I absolutely connect to. When I realize I'm spiraling, I think, okay, center, because I'm not good to anybody if I can't take care of myself first.
Really. That goes way back to like what I was saying to Miles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Song.
Yeah. Would you like to quote it? You picked it. I love this song.
Treat People with Kindness by Harry Styles.
Ah,
I
Harry.
love all the lines in it, but maybe we can find a place to feel good and we can treat people with kindness. Is it kind of goes back to my like I think I sound like Pollyanna today, but I like the idea.
Yeah.
I like the idea.
It's
And
all
I'm
we
not at
got.
all saying that I'm always good at this. As you know, I have my rage moments.
But I mean, it is about creating spaces where people feel seen, supported, and valued. And, I do think that is the one of the symptoms of why people aren't feeling compassion. It is one of the symptoms of why we have a Trump presidency, is because the people that voted for him did not feel seen and heard in whatever, or whether that was true or not, they didn't feel it. And they thought that they voted against their own self-interests because for some reason they believed that he saw and heard them. I mean, we are in the find out portion of this storyline, but and they'll learn soon that he doesn't. But right now, that's what we need to do. So hopefully between now and the next time you listen to the things we know, you will try to spread a little more kindness in the world. I'm going to try to be better.
I fuck around with you, and you have a way that disarms people, that makes them want to come up and talk to you, and you don't find out first who they voted for when you're kind and
No,
bubbly to them. You don't. So like
no, you're right.
it's you have a way of actually that's probably a really great way to be. It's a protective aura of just being kind. And so, people don't bring that shit to your feet. That's how
Well,
I'm gonna look at it.
they have, but yeah, I mean, somehow I've escaped it as of right now, but I don't hold hope that I'll escape it for the next 4 years. That's for sure. Especially as we keep moving through the things we know and how we are going to show up on this pod for the rest of this year. So,
All right.
all right, thanks everyone for listening. Be kind, and we will be back next week.
So long.
Bye.